It's good that we watched the other video because it I think covered the war already. And I think this hyper focuses on South Korean politics in the lead up to the Korean War and in the aftermath of the Korean War. So it's good to, we already saw the fucking worst aspects of the Korean War. We already covered it earlier or with the Hakeem video. Guys, I don't understand. These are the American-backed government. Like, what is happening here? What the fuck is going on, man? I don't understand. America's the good guys. Why are they ethnically cleansing entire villages for their political mobilization? Why is America not stepping in and seemingly working in lockstep every step of the way? I don't understand. Holy, that is so crazy. Now let's talk about the South Korean development as a parallel in the same time frame.
Popular perception is often portrayed as the good of Western democracy versus the evil of totalitarianism. And I get why. It's an easy binary for people to understand, even if they don't agree with the labels. But like anything in history, it's never that simple. What if we told you that evil wasn't always evil and good wasn't always good? Today, we are going to look at an example of when the good was far more problematic than many people realize. I'm your host, David, and today we are going to look at the situation in South Korea in the period after the Korean War. This is the Cold War.
How could you not believe that Yeonmi Park was brought into slavery by a mentally disabled man? No, you don't remember that story correctly. It wasn't just a mentally disabled man. It was the entire family. Everyone in the Chinese family was mentally disabled, according to Yeonmi Park's story. Like, literally, the whole family. Not a single one that was not mentally disabled in the Chinese family that bought Yeonmi Park from North Korea. It might have even been a whole village, if I'm not remembering. I might be misremembering. Sometimes I am the foremost authority on Yeonmi Park lore. Who could forget some of the choice words that she had for Columbia University that she said was exactly like North Korea. Wokeness demonstrated by Columbia University students and teachers alike was akin to the totalitarian leadership of Kim Jong-un. Yeah.
On August 16, 1945, a day after Emperor Hirohito proclaimed the unconditional surrender of Japan, thousands of Koreans spilled into the streets, joining together in joyous celebrations. People danced, partied, and marched up and down the boulevards, waving Korean flags. After 4 decades of Japanese occupation, the peninsula would finally be independent. Unbeknownst to them, however, the newly emerged superpowers had already divided their land into 2 occupation zones, with the border marked along the 38th parallel. And how did that come about? Well, only a few days prior to the Japanese surrender, the Soviet Union had entered the Pacific War and had begun offensive operations into Manchuria and the northern parts of Korea. Facing the prospect of a complete Soviet occupation of the entire peninsula, the United States urgently came up with a plan to split Korea in 2, using the 38th parallel as the line simply because it would put Seoul into the American sphere.
Okay. Respect to this analysis so far.
Our good friend and supporter of this channel, General Douglas MacArthur, proclaimed this decision on August 15th in the General Order No. 1. To be honest, the Soviets could have easily rejected this and pushed for total control of all of Korea, as American and Allied troops were not in any position to challenge the Soviets. But to everyone's surprise, they raised no objections. Well, they did demand possession of Japan's northern island of Hokkaido, but MacArthur of course refused. The Koreans, for their part, were quick to establish people's committees throughout the provinces, as well as the People's Republic of Korea, which served as the central governing institution connecting them. Don't be fooled by the name though. Despite being called peoples, and the association we have with them now as representing socialist or communist governments, these committees encompass the entire political spectrum, since the task at hand was the decolonization of the peninsula. The PRK leaders chose as president a right-wing nationalist, Syngman Rhee, who, with the blessings of the American government, arrived in Seoul in mid-October. In one of those weird moments of history, Rhee wasn't initially asked if he wanted to be elected, so when he became aware of it, he actually refused the position. Just a few days before, the USSR had revealed their own champion in Pyongyang, Kim Il-sung, presented before a cheering crowd. With spheres of influence now determined and the major political players in place, the two superpowers began reshaping the political landscape of their respective sides of the line dividing the peninsula. The Soviets faced opposition from the right-leaning nationalist and Christian tendencies of the population, and while they did recognize the PRK and the committees, they did everything they could to make sure Kim Il-sung would gain the upper hand. For the Americans, however, the situation was a bit more complex. Seoul was the heart of the Korean political world, and disagreements between the Korean right wing and the United States Army military government in Korea, or USAMGIP, were not out of the ordinary. Discontent among the populace was also growing, fueled by rampant inflation, unemployment, poverty, and opposition to occupation policies. Many of the disenchanted turned to leftist-led labor movements, resulting in a general strike and the Daegu Uprising in the fall of 1946, which quickly spread across the southern provinces. The government crackdown that followed.
What will happen? Popular leftist uprising in American-controlled Korea? Surely the Americans go, wow, the people of Korea, the working class of Korea, seemingly are resentful against our guy. As a nation that is tasked with defending the principle of liberal democracy, we will certainly ensure that the people's wishes will be, the people's actions will be rewarded with swift justice in the direction of the demands being made by this popular uprising. Certainly, right? I wonder what will happen in South Korea next.
Followed resulted in the deaths of 92 policemen, 163 civil workers, 116 civilians, 240 rioters, and the arrest of around 2,600 people.
Wait, what? No!
In the South,
No! What? That's not what?
Americans were mostly concerned with rooting out communist influence, naturally, yet the Korean far right didn't limit itself in dealing with just the leftists. They were determined to exterminate any political opposition that appeared to be a threat, including the prominent politicians Yeo Un-hyung and Kim Gu, who were assassinated in July of 1947.
What the fuck? What? Yo, chill. What? I mean, certainly American intervention is about to kick in any moment now, right? Because they fucking hate. They hate this sort of thing. They hate it when a foreign country is behaving this way. I mean, this is this is at this point our protectorate, you know? This is a country that we have profound interest in against the bulwark of communism. Let's see.
And June 1949, respectively. The American occupation forces did their part in uprooting communist elements, declaring the People's Committees illegal, stopping...
What? Whoa, what? No. What do you mean? No, but what about... But liberal democracy? What do you mean? What? You mean to tell me that the American military occupation helped? Stop. He's... you joke. You must joke.
Out every activity that was deemed...
Hasan, I'm as shocked as you are. It's okay. I am shocked. I'm confused. I fear that, I thought that this would be the opposite. America always does colonial occupation with good intentions in mind. Guys, surely, bear with me here. Surely this is a one-off. And I'm sure that as soon as they realize that they're just murking fucking random student protesters, the American government will change its course and not severely escalate the penalties that the Korean people now have to withstand. No. I think this is just a one-off. It was an accident. They didn't understand that this wasn't like about rooting out communism, which, by the way, in and of itself is not an honorable goal. Let's see.
Deemed red and arresting or killing hundreds of communist activists. Now, while each side was purging their political adversaries, several gatherings between US and Soviet authorities took place with the intent of uniting Korea, though it quickly became evident these discussions were fruitless as neither side was willing to back down.
Yeah, I wonder why one side would be like, dude, you're fucking literally murking people living in the area that you're controlling, and for exhibiting sentiment I mean, it just seems like a lot of people have died, but like certainly it's not going to. Certainly, this is not going to lead to more deaths. I know my America, not my America. I say, you know, they're just trying to reason with these guys. They're just trying to reason with the big bad. I'm sure that there won't be more deaths and destruction that is coming down the pipe.
Eventually, the Americans decided to shift responsibility to a newly created provisional council in the South, headed by Syngman Rhee and the United Nations, that would sponsor elections in 1948. While the prospect of free elections sounded good, the communists living in the South didn't take the news well, as a separate southern state, especially run by a rightist government, was against their goals. So it didn't take long until a large uprising occurred, this time on Jeju Island. The fighting between guerrillas and government forces would last for a year, but the insurgency didn't have the power to stop the elections from taking place in the rest of the country. Well, rest meaning only the southern part, as the Soviets denied access to UN officials. Nevertheless, the people showed great enthusiasm in voting for their leaders for the first time, though within a month, the elected assembly voted to implement a presidential system instead of a parliamentary one, a move that showcased Rhee's political power. This also set a precedent for indirect presidential election, a move that would be used in the future to maintain dictatorial regimes. Rhee was then...
Yeah, I want to go back to this really quickly. Something to remember, were there partisans, or not partisans, were there like right-wing people in North Korea? Of course there were. Okay, were they violently dealt with? Certainly. You have to think about what the political ambitions are for the people that are being suppressed violently oftentimes, why they're being suppressed violently oftentimes. In many circumstances in like USSR aligned countries, and they're not infallible either, there's certainly a lot of violence that gets dished around, different time and place overall. The targets of ire, or the targets of violent action, or any sort of serious political or criminal repercussions in USSR aligned countries was almost always those in positions of power, those who own capital, those who want to maintain allegiances to some oftentimes right-wing fascists, specifically because they wanted to disrupt and maintain a capitalist mode of production. Now, in that process, I need you to understand, in that process, were there a lot of unjustifiable penalties that regular ass people incurred? Abso-fucking-lutely. Okay? The difference, however, is that like the uprisings that they're talking about are not even entirely communist. The uprisings they're talking about that the South Korean government squashed violently were literally just a collection of, no right-wing uprisings in North Korea at the time, no massive popular discontent at the time at least. Yes. And also on top of that, the uprisings are happening completely outside of the scope of like North Korea. It's not like they're, egging it on or something. These are just like people who think, well, my fucking family members live in the North, and I also have sympathies to not living under American occupation. These were students. These were fucking students who were slaughtered ruthlessly.
Tuesday marks the 70th anniversary of the Jeju Massacre of 1948.
This is a South Korean broadcaster that is, many years later talking about the Jeju Massacre. I need you to understand, like, this is the most conservative way to approach the subject matter.
Significant tragedy in modern Korean history. The incident refers to the killing of some 30,000 Jeju Island residents at the hands of the police and military. And since a government fact-finding report came out in 2003, activists have called for a deeper investigation to shed more light on what happened, but the search for truth has been slow in coming.
Cheongbang Waterfall is a famed tourist destination on Jeju-do Island, known for its scenic landscape. But 70 years ago, the sea below the waterfall was the site of a tragic bloodshed. At the time of the incident on April 3, 1948, the area was crowded with police stations and detention camps where mass slaughters were perpetrated. 247 people are so far known to have died in this area. However, based on testimonies that killings were conducted every day, the number of victims appears to be much higher.
By the way, as the chatter also correctly pointed out, if you're shocked by 30,000, Google Indonesia. Jakarta method. because god damn, that fucking slaughter puts this to shame. That slaughter also led by American-backed freaks, led to an insane amount of people being butchered. So the thing is, yeah, Sri Lanka as well. The thing is, if you don't have a real popular method of governance, as long as you're aligned with U.S. interests and openly say, like, I'm anti-communist to the fucking bone, they will literally let you do mini holocausts in your own country, and they will arm you for it. They will arm you so you can do it. Sometimes they'll use American soldiers to support and facilitate and engage in active militant defense. Sometimes they will give you intelligence information that they share with your intelligence community, specifically so that you have a never-ending sea of targets that you can slaughter. This is how it goes in the name of liberalization and liberation.
시체도 찾지 못한 분들도 많이 있는데 앞으로 우리
It says many haven't even found the remains of their loved ones, so I hope this can be addressed as well as other areas that must come to light.
그거에 좀 더 노력하고 또 그 확실하게 우리가 규명을 낼 수 있는 그런 것들이 더 노력해주기를 바랍니다.
Identifying the whereabouts of those who are unaccounted for is also a pressing task. Some 5,000 people on the island are believed to have gone missing at the time, but how and why remains unknown. Government support is urgently necessary for a state-level investigation into the Jeju massacre, whose many facts remain in the dark even after 70 years.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the brutal South Korean dictatorship fucking absolutely slaughtering people who led a popular uprising against the brutal South Korean government. At the time, America fucking 100% was like, oh, they're killing communists. It's great. And it's wild because, once again, they weren't even fucking communists. It's completely unacceptable even if they were. But the very fact that they weren't communists also makes this even crazier.
UN officials. Nevertheless, the people showed great enthusiasm in voting for their leaders for the first time, though within a month, the elected assembly voted to implement a presidential system instead of a parliamentary one, a move that showcased Ri's political power. This also set a precedent for indirect presidential election, a move that would be used in the future to maintain dictatorial regimes. Ri was then, unsurprisingly, elected president by the assembly on the 20th of June, and the new Republic of Korea was inaugurated on August 15th, on the third anniversary of liberation.
I'll give you an example. If the Syrian Ba'athist Party was aligned with the United States of America, the horrific nature of the Assad regime would never be discussed. It would be not even a blip on American history. He would, one, still be ruling Syria. It wouldn't matter. Two, he could be as cruel as he fucking wanted to. You would never hear about the fucking prisons. Okay? Never in a million years. And this isn't to say that, like, Bashar al-Assad was an anti-imperialist of the bone or something like that. He wasn't. He was just a horrifically incompetent and very selfish regional power that was definitely playing enough ball with the other regional powers. But that also meant that he was, in an effort to maintain his regime, utilizing Hezbollah and also, which was, the Iranian-backed military groups, and also Russia, in order to continue his dominance over the people. So, for me, the way I see it, if he was using America instead, maybe even Turkey alongside America, using NATO forces to suppress all these people, he would be cherished as a fucking hero. He would be given the opportunity to do such things and would be celebrated for it. I was thinking about this the other day. It's like he's a secular guy, right? This is the secular Ba'athist Party. Virtually every single aspect of any kind of popular uprising from the Sunni Syrian population would be stamped out as jihadists. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't jihadists, okay? This doesn't mean that there aren't Salafis in the fucking popular resistance against Assad. They certainly have been overtaken by these groups, okay? Excuse me, HTS is former jihadi, former Al-Qaeda. Having said that, however, there was obviously a very good reason for why people felt resentful, angry, fearful of the Assad regime. But always remember, if Assad was unconditionally pro-America across the board, you would have never heard about anything. You wouldn't have heard about chemical weapons. You wouldn't have heard about the prisons. You wouldn't have heard about the fucking torture. And this is proof. Okay? The way that South Korean development is discussed in the Western world, the way that the South Korean government is discussed in the Western world is never with clear terms such as this.
The Soviet Union would reply a few weeks later by formally establishing the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Both states claimed sovereignty over the entire Korean peninsula, a policy that set the stage for a head-on collision. So life wasn't easy for the newborn southern state. For starters, the rebellion on Jeju Island was still going on, and another uprising would be added to that in mid-autumn. Known as the Yeosu-Suncheon Rebellion, it began on October 19th in the port city of Yeosu after disgruntled soldiers of the 6th and 14th Regiments refused to fight against the Jeju guerrillas. Within a day, the 2,000 rebels had total control of the city.
It's so weird. Why is this objectively popular American-backed government breeding so much hostility by the population it's supposed to be democratically governing?
And soon seized Suncheon as well as other nearby towns. They were joined by leftists waving red flags and calling for a Korean People's Republic, the old PRK, though some raised North Korean flags and pledged their loyalty to Kim Il-sung. They even went so far as to establish people's courts and then tried and executed several police officers, government officials, landlords, and rightists. A newspaper controlled by the rebels made their goals known to the public. First, all Americans would have to leave Korea and all government authority should be transferred to the People's Committee of Yeosu. It also called for land redistribution, a purge of officials who had cooperated in the past with the Japanese, and finally a union of the land under the Northern regime. They would get none of these things, however, certainly not on America's watch. With US personnel in advisory and organizing roles, the South Korean army managed to largely suppress the rebellion, though pockets of resistance would remain until 1957. But the violence didn't stop there, as reprisals from loyalists began, who went on to shoot people who they had the slightest suspicion of supporting communist uprising. In total, around 3,000 people were killed in the uprising that ultimately had only one winner, Syngman Rhee, who used the opportunity to further strengthen his power and wipe out all resistance to his rule. In May of the following year, the larger rebellion on Jeju Island was put down as well. It was an unprecedented massacre as both—
Still you sit here and listen to this from a Western world country? What?
Sides, especially the South Korean government, committed atrocities
Hold on.
to his rule. In May of the following year, the larger rebellion on Jeju Island was put down as well. It was an unprecedented massacre as both sides, especially the South Korean government, committed atrocities and war crimes, resulting in entire villages being wiped from the map. Estimates indicated around 30,000 casualties, although privately, the governor of the island reported almost 60,000 dead. Almost as shocking was the fact that for—
Guys, I don't understand. These are the American-backed government. Like, what is happening here? I don't get it. What the fuck is going on, man? I don't understand. Like, I don't understand. America's the good guys. Why are they doing a complete fucking— Why are they ethnically cleansing entire villages for their political mobilization? Why is America not stepping in and seemingly working in lockstep every step of the way? I don't understand. Why is America not using its own pre-existing laws against the foreign ally that's currently also committing a genocide in Gaza? Why is America not stopping Israel? They are the good guys. Why are they not doing that? Perhaps it's not America stopping these countries, but instead not only allowing them to do this, but also urging them to do so.
"50 years afterwards, even the mention of these events was a crime punishable by beatings, torture, and time in prison. But while Syngman Rhee was putting out one fire, another one was being lit, this time on the opposite side of the country, when on the 4th of May, border battles began at Kaesong, an incident initiated by the South. Skirmishes and raids along the 38th parallel would continue until December, and the only reason all-out war didn't break out that year was that both superpowers wanted to avoid war and made clear they wouldn't help if an unprovoked general attack was launched. So, going into 1950, the strategy for both sides was to hope for a provocation from the other side.
Yeah, for the record, I need you to understand something. The Korean War has yet to start. like in the way that it's taught in history books, understand that this hasn't started yet. Just like Deir Yassin is not featured in the Israeli War of Independence, okay, as a pivotal point, or the Nakba is a important aspect of like Israeli nation state development in its inception. This kind of stuff is not even considered to be to play a motivational role in the actions of the DPRK. Just so you understand, like all jokes aside, the big bad, America's like direct and active involvement has yet to begin. My professor at uni was raving about the killings in Indonesia were bad, but led to good things in the future. And Sukarno was a smart politician. I lost my mind when she said that. Yeah. Ask her if she feels that way about fucking Adolf Hitler. Insane.
Side so as to ensure assistance from their guarantor. But the strategic situation had changed by the spring of 1950 as the Soviets had broken the US monopoly on nuclear weapons and Mao Zedong had achieved final victory for the communists in China. So in April, Stalin gave his permission to Kim Il-sung for an attack on the South so long as Mao was willing to assist him. While concerned about US involvement, Mao ultimately agreed to support the North Korean endeavor, and preparations for the war that would break out at the end of the summer were escalated. Now, we've covered the events of the war in detail in other episodes, so we're going to fast forward a bit to 1953 and South Korea in the aftermath of the war. If you haven't watched our episodes on the Korean War, we'll link them in the show notes. Although devastating, the Korean War actually gave South Korea the chance to start again with a clean slate. Let me explain. The old aristocracy that once controlled people, markets, and enterprises had lost its political powers through land redistribution.
It's good that we watched the other video because it I think covered the war already. And I think this hyper focuses on South Korean politics in the lead up to the Korean War and in the aftermath of the Korean War. So it's good to, we already saw the fucking worst aspects of the Korean War. We already covered it earlier or with the Hakim video.
And because the war had caused mass migrations, which in turn shook things up in a country where solidity of lineage and place were pivotal. They were substituted by entrepreneurs that had amassed fortunes through war-related enterprises, middle-class merchants, and by some people that had engaged in more nefarious economic activities. You know, like money lending and black marketeering. Many of present-day South Korea's great corporations began taking shape during this period. But that didn't mean that the majority of people enjoyed any economic prosperity. Rhee's numismatic policy of just print more money had caused massive inflation, largely turning the urban population against him. Thankfully for Rhee, there was someone willing to provide financial aid, Uncle Sam and the good old US of A. Washington was willing to subsidize countries that stood on the front lines of the Cold War. The Republic of Korea and the 600,000-strong ROK Army were the bulwark that protected American interests in the area, as well as to disarm Japan. Syngman Rhee was very aware of South Korea's geostrategic importance to the United States and had no moral inhibitions in accepting every last dollar the American government was willing to throw at him. In fact, for almost a decade, nearly the...
This is the worst aspect of like American development. Marshall Plan alike, we only fucking give free money to countries as long as they're violent, rabid, fascist dogs that squash any semblance of like socialism that exists in your society. And it's so fucking annoying because America could have done this across the board and put forth a century of cooperation. But the issue then obviously would be that, you know, inevitably people will be like, I don't want to do this capitalism shit. Also, it's not really free money either. You're right. At least with the World Bank and the IMF, the money goes directly back to foreign investors, or the money is given to the countries, and the countries can only use it on foreign investment or foreign companies coming in. Oftentimes with a direct interest in privatizing whatever remaining public sector resources.
The entire government budget came from American funding. With corruption being widespread, it's of little wonder that large amounts of these dollars ended up in the pockets of people working under Rhee, like cabinet officials and his political friends. Rhee's maladministration didn't go unnoticed, and his years from 1953 to 1960 can be summarized as an increasingly desperate attempt to cling to power. In the election for the National Assembly held in 1954, he managed to receive an absolute majority, but only by using police harassment and restrictive electoral laws. And he didn't stop there. Through the clever use of good old bribery, he managed to get many independent members of the assembly onto his side, a move he needed to get the necessary 2/3 majority for a constitutional amendment that would allow for a third presidential term in 1956, which, of course, he got. However, the political mindset of the people had begun to change. People had had enough of the economic hardships, the out-of-control inflation, the corruption, and Rhee's authoritarian rule. His popularity declined rapidly in urban areas, and especially among the younger generations that tended to be better educated and thus had greater political understanding and stronger beliefs in democratic values and ideals. Facing the prospect of getting voted out of power, Rhee's administration resorted again to repression. A notable victim was Cho Bong-am, a former minister of Rhee's who made the simple mistake of founding his own party and obtaining an impressive 30% of the vote for the presidency in the 1956 elections. So, in February 1958, just a couple of months before the next assembly elections, he was charged with spying for North Korea and, after 2 trials, was executed in the summer of the following year. But even with the extensive repressions and electoral fraud, Rhee's Liberal Party managed to only get 38.7% of the votes, compared to the Democratic Party, which won 29.5%. Rhee responded to this stronger opposition the only way he knew how, with even stronger repressions. This culminated in the passage of a new national security law on Christmas Eve 1958. An attempt by the opposition to boycott the procedure was made in vain as the government mobilized the police and kicked them out of the building, then, unopposed, passed 22 bills, including the law that effectively turned South Korea into a police state. Under these new laws, criticizing the president was a crime, and intelligence agencies could arrest civilians merely on the suspicion of criminal activity. Ultimately, however, Rhee's electoral frauds would become his own undoing. In the presidential election of 1960, he was unopposed at the ballots as his rival had passed away from cancer. But not to be satisfied with only one victory, his government also heavily rigged the elections for the vice presidency, an act which very soon came to light and resulted in massive protests. On April 19th, thousands of university students marched towards the presidential residence, demanding Syngman Rhee's resignation and new elections. In an effort to suppress the protests, the police mercilessly fired into the crowds, killing more than 100 students. This, however, failed in its goal.
I'm so confused. Why is America... Oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. They already fucking destroyed North Korea in this process, and also offered logistical support to the incredibly violent ways in which the South Korean leadership had suppressed prior uprisings. So I guess the United States of America doesn't really care, it seems. I mean, it seems like they don't care that the government that they've designed to have rulership over the wonderful nation of South Korea, a nation that they also designed by partitioning Korea, is doing this to its own citizens.
Goal to disperse the demonstrations, and over the following days, more and more people joined the protests. Facing overwhelmingly larger crowds, this time the armed forces refused to open fire, and on the 26th of April, Rhee submitted his resignation. 2 days later, he was flown out of the country on a DC-4 belonging to the CIA, and would spend the rest of his days in exile in Hawaii. Now, following Rhee's resignation, South Korea had the chance to implement a democratic system. To help achieve this, Ho Chung, the Minister of Foreign Affairs under the Rhee administration, was tasked with forming a caretaker government that would revise the constitution and organize new elections. The amended constitution designated the Second Republic to have a parliamentary cabinet system instead of a presidential one, which is the first and only time such a government system has been implemented in the history of Korea. In the National Assembly, elections were held in late July. The Democratic Party triumphed, whereas Rhee's former party, the Liberal Party, only managed to obtain 2 seats. It didn't take long, however, for cracks to appear within the Democratic Party. While they had been united against their common foe, Syngman Rhee, with him gone, the party split into 2 factions. This political infighting, coupled with inexperience in governance, created a politically unstable environment that couldn't fight the corruption or fix the ruined economy Rhee's administration had left behind, although they did formulate a 5-year plan. And the troubles for the vulnerable Second Republic didn't stop there. The students, emboldened by their successes against Rhee's regime, frequently protested.
Chatter said, the more I learn about the United States' history and involvement in global affairs, the more I am confused as to why we didn't side with the Nazis. Was it just FDR? And the answer is both yes and no. The answer is yes for the most part. He had a lot of smoke in general. Okay, he had a lot of smoke in general for for Nazis, for sure. Uniquely had a lot of smoke. But also, at the time, at least like leading to the popularity of FDR, there was a lot more labor militancy. There was a lot more open socialism in the United States of America, something that is like impossible to contend with. Pearl Harbor was the straw that broke the camel's back. But I want to point to something else in American history, because we were pretty fucking close to aligning ourselves, or had aligned ourselves economically with Germany already. It's called the business plot. If the business plot had been successful, I think that America would have signed off on, I think America would have aligned itself with Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany. So yeah, he didn't have the smoke because of the Holocaust though. Yeah, but to be fair to FDR, many people did not understand the true severity of the Holocaust until after they had successfully fought against Nazi Germany. Like, you have to remember, information was infinitely more limited at the time. Like, I don't know if America would care or be agitated, especially considering that there were Jewish refugees that were escaping, and we turned them around. But they quite literally did not have internet. Not to sound like Young Thug talking about James Harden wearing a Blue Lives Matter gator, but like, they didn't have internet at the time. And a lot of the information that came out about the camps were directly propagandized by the Nazi government. There's a big part of guys, stop focusing on the James Harden joke that I made, okay? Like, the Red Cross, as we understand it, is not exactly an infallible institution to begin with, even in contemporary society. But the Red Cross at the time aided and abetted in lying about the concentration camps. There was great progressive leaders in the FDR and Amin in public life. His vice president was Henry Wallace, who was friendly to the Soviet. FDR once said he would not rerun if the DNC didn't put him on the ticket. Sadly, in his final rerun, he was too weak, and the DNC bosses placed their own people to have Truman as the VP and thus becoming president. Yeah. The Reisenstadt ghetto and the Red Cross. It was used as a model ghetto for deceiving International Committee of the Red Cross representatives about the ongoing Holocaust and the Nazi plan to murder all Jews. The Nazified German Red Cross visited the ghetto in 1943 and filed the only accurate report on the ghetto describing overcrowding and undernourishment. In 1944, the ghetto was beautified in preparation for a delegation from the International Committee of the Red Cross and the Danish government. Well, during the war in 1942, there was a Polish captain who snuck into the concentration camp and was there for 2 years, I think. He leaked info to the British, and the UK military dismissed the reports as outlandish because they didn't want to believe the reports were accurate. Now, what's really interesting about that is, think about it this way. We have direct insight into the everyday existence of Palestinians living in Gaza, and there's a current genocide happening in Gaza. Okay? There's a current genocide happening in Gaza. We have direct insight. We have real-time coverage. And yet there are still a non-insignificant percentage of the public that turns a blind eye to it, or even recognizes the atrocities and says, no, it's good, we want more of it. And regardless of the people's opinion on the genocide in Gaza, no changes take place. So, like, imagine, even with the incredible amount of information that we can get nowadays, where you can directly talk to a person that is currently under occupation, that can die at any moment, it still doesn't, it still does not matter. People still do not change their opinions on it. So I don't think that the Holocaust in and of itself was, it was not a important factor in the Allied forces going in and fighting against Nazi Germany. And I'm not so sure that they would give a fuck to begin with, if I'm being super, super honest.
Demanding economic and political reforms. In October, they even went one step further, storming the National Assembly and forcing the members there to enact laws for the punishment of government officials and policemen that had acted in an anti-democratic manner during the era of the First Republic. Seeing the weakness of the Second Republic, the North Korean regime couldn't help but take advantage and began subversive activities, even proposing discussions surrounding unification. Many students found the idea of unification quite appealing, as North Korea at that time was actually in overall better shape and actively campaigned for it. But the northern regime aside, there was another institution that had significant political power, was more stable than the political world of the Second Republic, and had noticed the Republic's weakness. We are, of course, talking about the Republic of Korea Armed Forces. They had in the past actually planned a coup against Syngman Rhee, but were only stopped by the success of the students in the April Revolution. They were, however, displeased with the progress of the new regime, and a group of officers concluded that the time for a military takeover had come. In the early hours of May 16, 1961, Major General Park Chung-hee, with 250 officers and 3,500 soldiers, announced the army's intervention to save the country. Park dissolved the National Assembly, instituted martial law, and declared the formation of the Supreme Council for National Reconstruction, a fancy title for the military junta he had just established. A series of dictatorial regimes in South Korea would remain in place until the establishment of the Liberal Democratic Sixth Republic in 1987. The history of South Korea stands as an excellent example of the Cold War, a country which stood firmly in the anti-communist alliance, but did so at the expense of human rights and civil liberties, which its financial and diplomatic sponsor state, the United States, proclaimed to be the reason for fighting the Cold War in the first place. South Korea is only one example during the Cold War of Washington providing support for dictatorial and repressive regimes in order to keep the world safe from communism. As we said at the beginning, the side of good is not always good. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and to make sure you don't miss all of our future episodes, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and have rigged the pressing of the YouTube bell button so that no matter which bell button you press, it supports only.
Yep. Great video. Shocked to find out such a fucking solid video. Yes, this was South Korea, brutal dictatorship in the post-war period. I think I missed a part of your thoughts about the Allied forces' awareness of the concentration camps. From what I understand, there was little awareness till after at least 1945 and after. No, that's what I said. And I'm saying that even if there was awareness, judging by our reaction to Israel, I don't think that like people would give a shit. Like that wasn't the reason. I think the way that people portray it, they talk about it like Americans went to Nazi Germany and fought them specifically to liberate the concentration camps. But many people were oblivious to that reality. There were certainly people who wanted to join forces, who wanted to fight, push back against Nazi Germany's actions. Okay, that is real. That is a real thing. FDR was one of those people. But it took Pearl Harbor for Americans to even be convinced to join the Allied forces. So think about that. Like, there needed to be a pivotal moment that like would cause enough popular support to even join. FDR used Pearl Harbor as FDR basically used Pearl Harbor effectively to say like, no, this has to happen. This is completely unacceptable. Prior to that, the policy was isolationist. I wouldn't necessarily say isolationist because obviously Pearl Harbor also happened because, we were not excited about Imperial Japan's actions in the region. Like we were taking action against, the Japanese Empire, which is what led to Pearl Harbor. And then Pearl Harbor is what led to U.S. involvement in World War II, like active involvement in World War II. And make no mistake, there were a lot of people all the way until the very end that actively wanted to not fight Nazi Germany and instead align with Nazi Germany. Some of them are known as, Henry Ford comes to mind. No, General Patton's attitude is different. He was always a fucking racist piece of shit from what I understand, but I was talking about the American German Bund movement or American capitalists in general that continue to trade. That's why I say if the business plot had gone through and FDR was the tide of history would be very different. Anyway. God damn, dude. Holy shit.